This is the Literacy Mindset Podcast, where education leaders discuss identifying and removing phonological barriers with MindPlay's CEO, Jeff Pendleton.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Literacy Mindset. This is part of our Oklahoma series, our mini-series, and I have my guest today, Dr. Susan Wray from, Wellston Elementary School, Wellston Public Schools in Wellston, Oklahoma. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Very excited to have you. We're going to talk about a number of things, and we've got an eclectic background from all the way from science involved here to an elementary education degree and working at the State Department, a number of different things. So I'm excited to kind of dive in on a number of different topics. But would you mind just orienting the audience a little bit to how it is that you got into the seat that you're in today?
All right. So I started out with a degree in elementary education. I taught anything from first grade, really all the way through fifth grade, some STEM classes there that I taught, but mainly self-contained classrooms. Transitioned into a fifth grade science classroom, and then received my middle school certification for science education and began teaching middle school science classes. Okay. That led me to work at the State Department as I was involved in many state endeavors and initiatives. As a teacher, I connected with state experts, and I was employed there in science education through the program called Oklahoma Excel and as the director of elementary science and engineering. And then decided to get into the school system as a leader as I was trying to implement a lot of changes in Oklahoma and improvements in school systems. At the State Department, I realized that it was important for me to kind of get a glance of what it looked like to lead a school and be able to do this work within a school. And so I had a great friend who was a superintendent of Wellston, and he brought me along to help lead in this district.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like it's an exciting endeavor, and we'll dive into a couple of things. Okay, you mentioned a bit of science in there,
yes,
right? And here we talk about a lot of reading, a lot of literacy, sort of thing. So one might say, well, she doesn't think about reading as much. She thinks more about science. So tell us a little bit about reading's influence on science, what you've seen throughout your career, and why you might use that today to influence how you think about literacy in your building.
Yeah. So when I first came to Wellston, one of the things that I noticed in my first year, it was really just an assessment of things, what was going on here.
Right.
And we had a reading curriculum that was from 2007. So that was the first thing that we wanted to do, was really get a high quality, some instructional materials that were high quality. But always in the back of my mind is science education. And the teachers here also knew that. So they also asked me, help out here as well. And so, as you know, a lot of people know that our standards are based on the next generation science standards. Right. And in those standards, there are three dimensions of those standards. We have the science and engineering practices, which are what are students doing? We have the disciplinary core ideas, what are students learning, and the cross-cutting concepts like how are students thinking. And if you look at your ELA standards and you look at your science standards, many of those things cross each other. So if you were to do a Venn diagram, you would have a lot of things in the middle that go together. For instance, in the science and engineering practices, students are making predictions. Right. They are asking a lot of questions. They're making claims. They're arguing. They're discussing. They're engaging in text to learn more. And then with your DCIs, they're learning vocabulary. They're learning how to explain a natural phenomenon in the world through their own language and through their vocabulary. They're learning vocabulary from each other. And then in the cross-cutting concepts, we're exploring things such as patterns and such as cause and effect, the same things that we're exploring in literacy with students. So we always bring those things out with teachers, look at those things that are crossing each other, and how can we support those things in science that we want students to gain in our literacy teaching as well.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes it's said in math, right, that especially when you get into word problems and other components, sometimes math scores are less a reflection on math than they are a reflection on reading. Is the same true or could be said of science at times? It's like more about comprehension and understanding of actual literacy terms than it is just of a science gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And we often talk about that in the assessment development process and trying to make a science assessment equitable for kids, that all kids can access those questions. And that's a challenge because of the literacy aspect of it. So the best thing I always like to think about also in literacy and in sciences, we're making sure that we use those UDL principles, those universal design for learning principles, so that students are engaged in it. So when students have a science assessment, they see something that they recognize. They see a phenomenon that they recognize. And they're highly engaged in it. But multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression in like those UDL principles across the board. And that really helps in science, and it helps in ELA as well. Right.
No, that's a great point. It's funny, you and I were talking a little bit about your elementary education degree, and we were talking about how not science of reading it was, and then realized that actually how science of reading it was. It just wasn't called science of reading. So as you think about the evolution from then until now, what would you describe as some of the differences in maybe what we didn't call science of reading in around the turn of the century to now, where everything is all about the science of reading? And what are some of the similarities and differences?
Definitely some of the differences are the language around it now. Teachers understand the language around the processes of reading, and they understand more deeply the connections between those processes. The simple view of reading, for instance,
right.
Those things weren't called out when, Scarborough's rope. They understand the different pieces of that. Whereas back when I was teaching reading early on, I taught first, second, and third grade reading. None of those things were specific. We did not know about phonological awareness, word recognition, RAM scores, and things that teachers just can converse about now and understand in different and talk about when they're talking about a student.
Right.
We just knew that our students were struggling or they were successful. And we knew that we were using those processes. We were having letter sound recognition processes going on. We were having students understanding syllables and what the different syllables meant and how to connect those syllables and how to blend words. We talked about rhyming and we did blending and we did all of those things, but we didn't call it in really anything. It was just, we followed the curriculum that embedded those things. But now it literally is a science for us, and we can actually talk about it in terms of science.
So you'll hear teachers talking about phoneme segmentation and how I might approaching phonological barriers, not just phonics as an umbrella and then also on sounds. I love that. Yeah, it really helps you practice your craft as a profession, right? When you can hone in on the skills that are required. And maybe let's go to that for a minute. You've kind of described as you think about your foundational skills of reading, and now we're really fine-tuned to the different parts of that. But you were able to identify that even amongst the proliferation of talking about foundational skills, there was one skill that was maybe lagging a little bit behind, and you've kind of made some changes around that, and that's fluency, right?
That's correct.
Talk about how that even comes about
Sure.
today. There's measurement, there's other things that happen, but I'd love to dive into that.
Yeah. So at Wellston, our pre-K students and our kindergarten students take the ELQA benchmark assessment.
Okay.
And we also use it to progress monitor our kids. We use NWEA reading fluency to assess our students that we feel like might have some dyslexia. It's that dyslexia screener. But ELQA is a really fast screener, and it really looks at students in kindergarten and pre-K and the word and the letter sound recognition, the connection between those things, those foundational pieces, that phonological awareness piece of it. And then transitioning into first grade, we use reading fluency assessment from NWEA as well, which does a fantastic job of identifying the foundational skills for our students and making sure they're above that 50th percentile in their foundational skills. And then in first grade, it starts to move them over into assessing oral reading fluency. And so students have to be able to read with 75% accuracy, several sentences in just a few minutes with 75% accuracy to move over into oral reading fluency.
Okay.
What we have noticed about our second graders is they're all moving over to oral reading fluency, but they're not meeting the benchmark for fluency. So our kids need to read 100 words a minute, and they're hitting about that 70 words a minute. So a lot of our kids are not quite tier 2. Some of them are tier 2, but a lot of them are that tier 1 plus, where we want them to be tier 1. So what I've recognized and we have recognized is that we need to start in pre-K, not just with foundational skills, because we assess foundational skills. So that's for what we teach. But now we're realizing we need to think on down the line. We need to start in pre-K with strategies to address fluency so that by the time they get to second grade, they're at the benchmark for the fluency.
That's great. I love hearing the ability to diagnose, understand, put practices into place to sort of address that. As we go up the grades a little bit, third, fourth, and fifth, a common thing that we see sometimes is students that might be, a couple grade levels below. It tends to be phonological in nature a lot of times. For whatever reason, some gap was developed and it just never kind of got addressed. But then you have the challenge of a fifth grade teacher. Sometimes have an elementary background like yours. Sometimes they might be more discipline oriented. And so it's not as natural for them to teach the basic phonological skills or foundational skills.
Yes.
What do you guys do? How do you address that in your building? Because it's not always easy to solve depending on the staff that you have.
Yeah, that has been a challenge that we are actually just beginning to recognize in our older kids. We also have that COVID factor with those kids because they were in our pre-K and kindergarten. So we're not sure if that's having any, so that is part of the reason that we actually started this summer training on the multi-tiered system of support, the MTSS. Because through that, we're going to be able to target those gaps for those older kids. There's always that, do you test students for special ed? We have 504s. We're really trying to get away up from that if they really don't need it, and really put them within our MTSS program. So we'll be pulling kids to work on those skills that they need. They'll get all of the tier 1 instruction, which we know tier 1 instruction is the most important instruction they actually get. And all kids need tier 1 instruction. But then we will have times. We're also scheduling next year for 2 days a week, a 30-minute intervention time. So we have kids going to teachers who are specializing in reading, and then teachers who are specializing in math. And then our enrichment kids will go at that time. And we'll be moving those kids around depending on their needs. But we're scheduling specific time for that. within our day for all grades to have intervention and enrichment. So we're hoping that moving forward, we'll be able to address some of those issues before they move on to middle school.
Right. No, that's great. And as a principal, do you find, what do you find to be more challenging at times? Do you find identifying the skills and making sure the skills can be taught? Or is there we know that, but scheduling is the biggest nightmare. Like, how do you find a half an hour in a day, right, for an intervention block? Where do you find some of the biggest challenges in addressing this?
So identifying the skills is not hard because our assessments are fantastic. NWEA identifies the skill. It puts them in groups based on skill. It also gives interventions to support students that are struggling with those skills. The thing that is difficult is teachers don't have experience with this. Like moving teachers to, we tend to stick with our tier 1 kids and like as long as we have 80% of them, we're doing good and and so getting them to see the value of pulling those kids over and really working with the staff to value trying to address those gaps within kids because like you said, also time, obviously, that's part of their problem. That's part of the teacher's problem because they have 80% of their kids on tier 1. Those kids have to be actively learning as well. So that's the challenge of figuring all of that out. But like I said, we're hoping that our MTSS system and our intervention time is going to address some of those issues because we're going to give specific time when we're all doing it.
Yeah. No, I love that as sort of a carved out earwork time, if you will. Yeah, it's interesting as you talk about the 80% or the traditional bell curve that can exist, and there's so many ways that in the field of statistics you would argue that 80% is fine, like that's just the normal distribution. But in education, K-12 public education in particular, right? Those 20%. Are particularly important to us. And you told me about a personal story on that front as a struggling reader yourself, right? And so talk about why it's so important for us to be able to go beyond the 80% bell curve.
Yeah. So I think that is where equity comes into play there, because as a struggling reader, growing up, we had the SRA programs where everybody was a color, and everybody, celebrated their color. Well, when you're a non-reader, you never celebrated your color, right?
Celebrate.
Yeah. And there weren't opportunities for those literacy gains and just everything that happened back then with equity in kids. And so I wasn't part of the 80% in reading. I was the 80% in math and science. Those were my strengths. But we spent a lot of time trying to fix Susan in her reading problem. Right?
Sure.
Yeah. And so I find it very, very, very important now to include those kids in all the things that are going on and making sure. One of the things I tell students when they come into my office for different variety of reasons is I have 3 jobs here as a principal. My first one is the safety and security and the well-being of all kids, that they want to be here, that they feel welcome, that they feel loved, that they feel appreciated, that they feel like they're making academic progress. The second one is that high quality teaching and learning is going on to the best of our ability. And the third one is I have a lot of State Department requirements that I have to get done. So, but that first one, that students, so that makes me, I'm not the gatekeeper of a lot of things around here because I believe in teachers and I trust teachers and they are the gatekeepers of most things in my building. But the one thing that I'm a gatekeeper of is that security and safety and welcoming feeling of all kids. And so they have to feel included. They have to be a part of all processes. And I think they grow just because of that. The culture that we build within our building is the biggest difference maker for kids.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I appreciate you being willing to share that and your experience and why that matters so much. We could
just to add on just for 1 second to that.
Yeah, please.
I became a reader my freshman year in college. And it was because as a college student, I was just like everybody else. I walked in as a freshman.
Right.
I was given the same text as all the other freshmen. And the professor that I had at the time in English Comp 1 gave us texts to read and had reading circles where we would discuss our feelings about the text, and I couldn't wait to read the next chapter. Changed my life.
It just because of a little bit of a different lens on it and
Absolutely
creating a space for you, frankly.
Welcoming space, a culture.
Yeah, it is about. I love that. Culture is so important. Well, we could talk forever about this, but we don't have more time. I'm going to ask you a final question as we wrap up here. What are you most excited about for education as you kind of look beyond the horizon? Are there things that you're experiencing right now, or things that you anticipate experiencing that you just are super excited about?
I would say that I'm most excited about the continuing work that I see the leaders in education doing. There are people still at the State Department I couldn't survive without them.
Really?
I'm partnering with so many different people. I believe in partnerships. And there are a lot of people out there, not just at the State Department, our tribes in Oklahoma,
right?
Our counties. There are so many initiatives out there right now that you can partner with to support your teachers, support your students. And I've reached out. We have so many partnerships going on right now. And I'm super excited about what those partnerships are going to do for our school. And I know that it's happening across the nation, that people want to help students and they want to help educators.
That's awesome. I love it. We believe in a partnership model here. Partnership is a key to success, to creating the culture that you spoke of. So many great nuggets today. Dr. Wray, thank you so much for being on the show. Hopefully we get the chance to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Learn how we help students by identifying and removing phonological barriers at mindplay.com.